Welcome back. This is Chicken Philosophy. The Meccan Revelations. A lot of space up above my head today, but I couldn't resist. Part 42.
42?
Speaking of things I couldn't resist, longtime viewers of Chicken Philosophy will be like, oh, this again. Some of you might be like, I have no idea what's going on. And to you specifically, let me recommend this series of books. That's the nice thing about having room over my head, is there's plenty of room for this kind of thing. Now, the main book is this. There's a BBC miniseries from the 80s, I want to say, that they made based on this. It was originally a radio play. More recently, I mean, to my mind, it was just yesterday, but it was probably 20 years ago they made this movie, which is like, Douglas Adams did kind of give his stamp of approval right before he passed away, from what I understand, on that movie. Even though, like, lovers of the book series might watch that movie and be like, I didn't like how they did this aspect or that aspect of it. You know, I was actually planning to button this top one. So anyway, read those books, watch those movies, become familiar, become a galactic hitchhiker like me, and then you will understand about 42. And one thing that I can say is, people who love Douglas Adams, people who love Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, have more fun on their 42nd birthday, just by virtue of it being their 42nd birthday, than I think most people. I think that's safe to say. Alright, so, yeah. Those of you who are also watching the Buddhist Books podcast, some people aren't. If you like Chicken Philosophy, I think you ought to give Buddhist Books podcast a chance. It has a slightly different vibe, but it's me reading books. If you like me reading books, I think you should give it a chance. That's all I'm saying. Just file it away. Here's something over my head related to Buddhist Books podcast, and here's the link. Just go click it. That's the channel. Click subscribe and come back to here if you want, or stay there and watch videos there. I'd be perfectly happy if you did that. That is the mission I felt called by my higher self to do, and Chicken Philosophy bloomed out of it. And I think that Chicken Philosophy is a part of it, in a way. Of the mission, I mean. And I don't know if I need to put a fine point on what the mission is exactly. It has to do with reading books in the present and in the future, in this world of vertical videos or horizontal videos on the internet. And it has to do with me personally. It has to do with me opening up and expressing myself, on various levels, in various ways, using various masks, personas. Persona used to mean mask. It was what actors wore in ancient Greece. And you get it, right? Kind of. So, Buddhist Books podcast. What's my point? Yeah, my point is, quite often, the setting. So on Buddhist Books podcast, the main thing we read is the Tipitaka, which is the 3 baskets of pre-sectarian early Buddhism. It's the oldest scriptures of any form of Buddhism. It's much more grounded, much more like, okay, Lord Buddha is a guru. He's enlightened, and he's teaching his monks how to be enlightened. The end. And then, like, 1,000 years later, people were like, Lord Buddha is a god, and there are many Buddhas, and some of them have never incarnated or someone got in touch with this one Buddha that's the greatest of all Buddhas, and you're supposed to reincarnate over and over until the whole universe is enlightened before you get enlightened. And so Buddhism went a lot of different directions over the centuries and in various forms. Zen is a little different from Tibetan Buddhism. Hopefully stuff is happening over my head. I'm sure it is. Anyway, what's the point? The point is that in these original stories that we've been reading, by we I mean me, and by me I mean technically Pymander, because here on Chicken Philosophy, the version of me that wears the Nyingma Nagapa shawl and recites Buddhist scripture on Buddhist Books podcast is known as Pymander. But outside of Chicken Philosophy, within Buddhist Books podcast, that's just Edward. That's me. That's the only me. And in reality, too, it is me, right? By the way, I apologize to Gwydion for stealing your spot. We still don't have your hat. We'll have it eventually. Anyway, the point is that in a lot of those stories, it starts off Lord Buddha and, whatever monks he's talking to in the moment. There's like groups of monks in various places around Bihar and the Pradeshes, the area that he was in. But, he moves from place to place, and in some stories he's underneath the banyan tree. Underneath the great banyan tree. What is a banyan tree? You see this behind me? That's a banyan tree. So, today we're underneath the banyan tree, not to be confused with the sycamore tree.
Under the sycamore tree.
Thank you, person whose name I ought to know. Gosh, when I don't have the internet right in front of me, my brain shrinks. When the internet's right in front of me, if I'm writing an email or writing on chat, I am a genius, because I can just Google whatever incomplete thought I have in order to complete the thought, in order to say the thing, which is where Editor Edward serves that role here on Chicken Philosophy when we need someone to Google something. Give us a wave, Editor Edward. All right, he's there. Anyway, I think that's enough rambling out of me. I should get to some kind of reading today, right? Shouldn't I? Yes. Okay, anyway, so cheers. We have no incense today, but we have the lovely scent of Sangolda, I think is where I am. Very close to, for those who've been following along, those who watched the previous episode, not of Meccan Revelation, but the previous episode on Chicken Philosophy that came out yesterday. It was called Secret of the Golden Flower Part 20 something. Then you already know that we are no longer at that place where we've been since the beginning of Chicken Philosophy, and we never will be again. But that bookshelf will return, and it'll look almost exactly, I'm sure, pretty close to how it has all along. One day, pretty soon. Hey, me yesterday, could you show everyone the new home of Chicken Philosophy? This, I am standing in the future home of Chicken Philosophy. So sometime in the next few weeks, the bookshelf is going to be somewhere on one of these walls. This is nice. Got my own little balcony. And then, of course, for people who are also watching Buddhist Books podcast, that bookshelf is going to be, I don't know, probably here, I'm guessing. Somewhere. I'll figure it out later. All right. Thank you, me yesterday, for that little tour. So now you know. So we're going to put the bookshelf in there sometime in the next few weeks. Fill it up with books stick this here phone in front of it and resume recording in front of the bookshelf where things are nice and normal. Nice and normal. House of Good Bones, is that the name? Hopefully it's appearing over my head. Those of you who've read that book will know what I mean when I say nice and normal, and you'll also know what I mean when I say mew. It's a good book. Read it. Read books. I'm trying to read books. You know, one thing happened yesterday. For the first time, I wanted to read books, but I'm addicted to social media, internet, YouTube, making videos, being creative, being seen, but from a distance. You know, like I don't actually want to like be social, but I don't want to disappear from everyone's consciousness entirely. So I compulsively make YouTube videos, right? But I also want to read, but I couldn't get myself to do it. So I started Buddhist Books Podcast. And then I wanted to read Carl Jung, so I started Chicken Philosophy. But yesterday, something happened. I picked up a book. It was this book. I've only read a few pages of it, but it's a good book. But I just sat there with my magnifying glass, because I'm getting a little old, and I've got dry eyes situation happening. So if it's natural light, then I can usually read okay. But the point is, I read a few pages of that book by myself with my magnifying glass, and I enjoyed it, and it was a huge victory for me. And maybe some of you older folk, or some of you folks who went to college and all that fancy stuff, fancy pants over there, will be like, what, you don't read, you don't just read books all the time like I do? No. If you look down your nose at me, all right, that's fine, I can see up your nose, you should blow it. And while you're blowing stuff, no, I'm just kidding. So yeah, I'm being vulnerable. I'm opening up to you. Those who saw the first episode of Chicken Philosophy ever already know this stuff. But yeah, I'd like to see literacy in the form of like reading paper books continue, not just glowing screens, because glowing screens aren't good for your eyes, it turns out. Anyway, so yeah. That House of Good Bones I read aloud to my wife, chapter by chapter. It's kind of sweet, I think. Shall I get to the reading? I think so. If this is your first time on Chicken Philosophy and you're still watching, okay, hi, my name's Edward. Sometimes I wear hats. Anyway, if you want to start at the beginning of Meccan Revelation, it's right there. I'm going to do bibliomancy now. In other words, I'm going to flip to a random page of the poetry of Hafiz, the 14th century Sufi, Persian Sufi poet. And then we're going to read the poem. Zikr, Z-I-K-R. Remembrance lowers the cup into his luminous sky well. The mind often becomes plagued and can deny the all-pervading beauty of God. When the great work of zikr is forgotten, that's a Persian word, it means remembrance. I have chained my every dancing atom into a divine seat in the Beloved's tavern. The Beloved is, when Sufis are saying the Beloved, they're referring to God. If you're familiar with the Songs of Solomon, that won't come as a surprise. You know that whole bride and bridegroom thing? They take it beyond just, we are like the bridegroom and God is like the bride, eh? They write love poetry to God and call him my beloved. But it's kind of the same Abrahamic bridegroom-bride relationship with God, where we, men, women, whatever, humans, are the bride, and God is the bridegroom in the alchemical wedding between microcosm and macrocosm. which is a process that we, who are the air inside the bubble, need to do in order to pop the bubble and realize that the air on the inside is the same as the air on the outside. Where in reality it always was. The bridegroom knows that, but the bride forgets. Sometimes she becomes a harlot. Oh, watch your language there, buddy. These inappropriate metaphors. Gotta update our metaphors. The spouse of the spouse. Gender-neutral spouse on earth. Gender-neutral spouse in heaven, which might be below. Never mind, I'll just keep reading. Gotta kind of learn the language of the metaphor and then work within the metaphor to understand the metaphor and communicate with other people who speak this symbolic language. I'm in the middle of a poem. I'm being very rude to the poet. What I have learned, I am so eager to share. Thank you, Editor Edward, for not playing that clip of Mallory. Every ill will confess it was just a lie. Every ill will confess it was just a lie. When the golden efforts of your love lift the precious wine to your mouth. Remembrance of our dear friend, also God, lowers the soul's chalice into God. I'm pretty sure friend, beloved, and God are all the same. Look, my sweet efforts and his sublime grace have now turned creation into a single finger on my hand. And from the vast reservoirs in my heart and palms, Hafiz offers God. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Sometimes I just can't resist that those lower chakras have to get their word in, sometimes edgewise, which can be kind of uncomfortable. Alright. I liked it. Sorry I interrupted it so much. I generally try not to do that with Hafiz poetry. I love Hafiz poetry. This is another book, I'll put it up there, that I recommend. You can hear me read out of it here. You can also get a copy for yourself if you're in a position to be getting copies of books. Alright. I was just noticing that there's other renderings by Daniel. Okay, there's other Sufi poetry that the same translator has translated, but I don't think it's Hafiz. Okay, so that's the poetry, and now for the prose, sort of. Now we're going to be reading the Meccan Revelations of Volume 1. Picking up right where we left off last time. We're pretty much right in the middle of the book, which means we're a quarter of the way through the series. There will come a time when there will no longer be the Meccan Revelations series on chicken philosophy, but not for a while. Here we go. This is Ibn Arabi speaking. If you say, quote, "Here we have an observed manyness," end quote, we will reply, manyness is the relations of the properties, of the preparedness, of the possible things within God Himself. Serendipitous bell ringing. I'm sure they're selling bread or something. Who is being? I mean, it's not a question like who is being. I am. I mean, it's that too, but God who is being. If you saw the previous episode, that will make sense. God is being. God is being existence itself, right? Now, relations are not entities or things. They are matters of non-existence in respect to the realities of the relations. So since there is nothing in existence but he, nothing is like him, because nothing is there. So understand and verify what we have alluded to, for the entities of the possible things have not acquired anything but existence. And existence is nothing but God himself. Since it is impossible for it to be a superadded thing that is not God, as is shown by clear proofs. So, what? Yeah. So nothing becomes manifest in existence through existence except God. Since existence / being is God, existence with a punctuation slash, not existence / being. No, nothing like that. Is God, and he is one, so there is nothing that is his likeness, since there cannot be two diverse or similar beings, with a capital B. Two existence itself says. So, in reality, with a lowercase r, sometimes reality is uppercase. In this case, it's lowercase. So in reality, as we have explained, gathering is that you gather within him existence, since he is existence itself, and that you gather within the entities of the possible things the properties of number and dispersion that become manifest, since these are their very preparednesses. So, you, your name, your DNA strand, your social security number, if you have one of those, your ID number of whatever kind, your UPC symbol stamped on your forehead, right? God is the white background and the ink with which the UPC symbol is. Okay. Right. Their very preparednesses. He is existence himself. Sorry, I got sidetracked. Once you have come to know this, you have come to know the meaning of gathering. That'll make more sense again if you've seen part 41. You should see part 41. If this isn't making sense, watch this one instead. There's a pretty good chance that you've seen that one and you hit subscribe. A bunch of people watched that and subscribed, so hopefully this isn't like too disappointing of a follow-up to that one for those who wanted to start there and move forward. Alright, where were we? Yes. Once you have come to know this, you have come to know the meaning of gathering, and of the existence of manyness. You have attached things to their roots, distinguished among the realities, and given everything its own property, just as God, quote, gave everything its own creation, end quote. Quran 20:52. If you do not understand gathering, as I have mentioned it, you know nothing of it. Jon Snow. As for the allusions of the tribe with a capital T, which we quoted, they all had their own aims, which I will mention, God willing, along with their knowledge of our own position, or the knowledge of the great ones among them. As for the saying, quote, gathering is God without creation, end quote, that is what we maintain, i.e., that God is identical with being / existence. However, the speaker did not turn his attention to what the preparednesses of the entities of the possible things bestow upon the being of God, so that it becomes qualified by that by which it becomes qualified. Isn't that redundant? Who am I to say? I'm just a guy. As for the saying of Al-Dakak on gathering, that it is, quote, what is negated from you, end quote, Editor Edward, could you recite for us the Aldous Huxley quote I'm thinking of? Reflecting on my experience of taking peyote, or mescaline, anyway, I find myself agreeing with the eminent Cambridge philosopher Dr. C.D. Broad, quote, that we should do well to consider much more seriously than we have hitherto been inclined to do the type of theory which Bergson put forth in connection with memory and sense perception. The suggestion is that the function of the brain and nervous system and sense organs is in the main eliminative and not productive. Each person is at each moment capable of remembering all that has ever happened to him and of perceiving everything that is happening everywhere in the universe. The function of the brain and nervous system is to protect us from being overwhelmed and confused by this mass of largely useless and irrelevant knowledge, by shutting out most of what we should otherwise perceive or remember at any moment, and leaving only that very small and special selection which is likely to be practically useful. End quote. Thank you. So, some folks from Edwardian England who wear a suit sometimes need a little peyote to get to where these Sufis get just by climbing mountains and hanging out in the desert and dancing and whirling round and round in circles in the 12th century. That was the case for Aldous Huxley. Pre-peyote, he wrote Brave New World, above my head. That's what he's best known for. That's what everybody's read. But in an interview with Alan Watts, he said, "Hey, Editor Edward here, after hours. So I know the quote you're thinking of, and I've been digging through this interview when Alan Watts interviewed Aldous Huxley, and very interestingly, I can't find any reference to the interview. I have it, because I went through a period 10 years ago-ish, 11 years ago, I don't know when it was, where I was listening to a lot of different specific things, and I went through a Huxley phase. Good morning. So that interview, for anybody whose ears perked up about that Aldous Huxley interview, Alan Watts interviewing Aldous Huxley, I have taken the liberty of putting it up here on Chicken Philosophy, but it's unlisted because I'm assuming that there's some reason why I can't find it on the internet. Like maybe there's someone strictly enforcing some kind of copyright or something. So it's unlisted, but you can get there from here, from this video, either by opening up the description below and scrolling down to the bottom, and you'll see Alan Watts interviews Aldous Huxley, or you can click right there. And I remember hearing Aldous Huxley say that, I mean, basically, I don't remember the exact words, but he was talking about how when he wrote Brave New World, he was young, and he had a particular kind of anger that he expressed in his dystopian, the famous story he's known for by everyone, Brave New World. And that he feels that it's unfortunate that that's the one that everybody reads, because the one that he thinks is more important was the one that he had written more recently, which was called either Island or The Island. We'll put it up there. And that's the one that you wanted to recommend, Edward, who is sitting in front of the banyan tree. And in the interview with Alan Watts, I did find this brief reference to it.
This utopian fantasy I've just finished is about a society in which, owing to historical accidents, there has been a mingling of Western with Oriental influences.
But I couldn't find the thing that you're thinking of. I think maybe it was actually from a different recording of Aldous Huxley. Unless, I mean, the interview is like over an hour long, and I've been skipping around, listening, trying to find different parts, and then listening to long segments while doing other things, and just, I couldn't find it. And so sorry I failed in my role as editor, Edward, to find the thing that you wanted me to find this time around. But if I do find that clip where he talks about the island, because the thing is, I heard him say that, and I bought the book and read the whole thing. And so I know it exists, because it was the thing that made me buy the book and read it, was him in his own voice saying, everybody should read The Island. I don't remember if it's called Island or The Island, but... Anyway, okay, I did my best. Sorry, back to you, Edward. Right. I'm giving editor Edward a lot of work to do today. This is a good book. I have read that book. And I exaggerate a little. I didn't read as much as I would have liked to. The thing is, my dad read everything. So I'm comparing myself to him. But quite often, like in the case of this, I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, I read that. I read this. I've read some books, you know. It's just that I know people who like read, you know, like 50 books a year, and I'm like, shit, do you retain any of it? You know, like I watch 50 Netflix shows a year. Does that count? Okay, sorry. That was a little bit more of an interruption than usual. But yeah, whenever he says about, the gathering is what is negated from you, then I always want to share with you that Aldous Huxley quote about, the one, you heard it, the senses are not additive, but subtractive, or whatever. He said it better than me. By he, I mean me. And Aldous Huxley, who I was continuing. His station demands that he mean the negation of that concerning which you make claims, while it belongs to him, as, for example, assuming the traits of the most beautiful names, M, B, N are all capitalized, most beautiful names, or attributing acts to yourself while they belong to him. I'd say that's the equivalent of, like, taking on a name. Like when a name is bestowed upon you, like Ben Tiferet, BT, or whatever. Then, it's a name in a sense of God, or it's an aspirational name to aspire to, to try to live by, or whatnot. Anyway, this... bracket parentheses explanation and bracket parentheses is given by Aldous state, not his words. If someone else had said them, he might have meant by, quote, what is negated from you, and, quote, existence itself. For that is what is negated from you, since God is existence itself. But I exist, I hear you saying. Yes, I know. God, so do I. We are two apertures through which God is speaking to himself through a phone and a screen. Alright. Where were we? Yes. But talking to yourself is a sign of insanity. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. No one ever accused God of being sane. Okay, what? As for the next saying, quote, gathering is the act of God through you, which he truly lets you contemplate, end quote. It means that you are the locus, not locust, locus, for the accomplishment of his acts, with a capital H and a capital A. Though in reality, the situation is in reverse. In fact, he is described by the property of the effects of the preparedness of the possible entities within him. So, like, if you call him creator, creator of what? Well, creation. What is creation? Well, it's, it's like, so he's defined by the... Never mind. Something like that, I guess. I don't know. Yes. He did not undertake to mention in whom the effect becomes manifest, so he may mean this, which is the position that we maintain and that the realities bestow. If we knew who is the author of this saying, we would judge it by his state, as we judged Al-Dakak, through our knowledge of his station and state. As for the saying of him who said, quote, gathering is the contemplation of true knowledge, end quote, you should know that true knowledge of God demands that the servant possess a sound relationship with works, a relationship affirmed by God. Hence, he prescribed works for him, and that God possesses a relationship with works that is affirmed by God for himself. God laid down in the law that the servant should say in his works, quote, from thee alone we seek help, end quote, Quran 1:5. The messengers of God are more knowledgeable of him than all other creatures. Moses, to whom God spoke directly, said to his people, quote, seek help from God and be patient, end quote, Quran 7:125. What? Moses in the Quran, you say? Yeah, Moses, Jesus, Abraham. I'll let it sink in for those who need a moment for it to sink in. Actually, I just want to take a sip of coffee, and it's a convenient excuse. The cup today is orange on the inside, white on the outside. Kind of like me. And that orange is the color of the robe of a Buddhist and a Hindu. And white is what assholes call people with pink skin.
I'm sorry, Pink Skin.
It's okay. I'm an asshole too. Thank you, Dennis Leary. Apparently he was ripping off Louis C.K., but Dennis Leary hasn't been canceled, so we'll give him the asshole song. He already took it from Louis C.K., but yeah. And apparently Louis was just going up, wouldn't it be funny if people just owned it and were just like, yeah, well, I'm an asshole. Oh, yeah, I did that. I did that because I'm an asshole. Yeah, I'm an asshole. And Dennis Leary was in the back going, interesting. And then he made a hit song, and it kind of made him... I think that song kind of put him on the map. That was the first I had heard of him. And then he was in Demolition Man after that. And then, I don't know, I guess he made a show or something. By then I was like unplugged from all that shit. What? Where are we? Who are we? What are we doing? Moses, right. Yeah, he was talking about Moses. And for us, mid-sentence, and for us there is no difference in correctness or in attribution to God between what God says and what a messenger of God says as described by him. God says, quote, I have divided the canonical prayer between me and my servant, end quote. Then he differentiated, explaining what the servant says and what God says.
But the servant waits while the master baits.
That was inappropriate, Editor Edward. I know I pointed to the screen, and that is what I wanted you to play, so when I point the finger at you, I'm pointing 3 fingers back at myself. Alright, so the words are attributed to the servant with a sound attribution. Words are a work, and the servant seeks help from God in his work. So it is correct to say that the work is shared. Thus have I gathered God and the servant together in the work, and this is the meaning of gathering. I have already explained that the entity of the servant is a locus of manifestation, that the manifest is God himself, and that God is identical with the attribute of the servant. Through the attribute, the work comes into existence, while the manifest is the worker. So the work belongs only and specifically to God. This we said when we explained what we just mentioned. We also explained that the entity of the servant possesses a specific preparedness which exercises an effect upon the manifest. I'm reminded of how Jesus would wash the feet of the disciples to show that those who would be greatest among you must be your servant. Or maybe he was just into that. Why not both? Why not both? Alright, sorry. What? Where were we? Yes. So the work belongs only and specifically to God. This we said when we explained what we just mentioned. Yeah, twice, Edward. We also explained that the entity of the servant possesses a specific preparedness which exercises an effect upon the manifest. It is this which gives rise to the diversity of forms within the manifest, which is God himself. This preparedness made the manifest say, quote, from thee alone we seek help, end quote. The manifest, through the effect of the preparedness of the praying entity, addresses the property of the name the Helper, asking it to help it in its work. For if the preparedness of the entity of the possible thing should bestow incapacity or weakness, its property would appear in the manifest. So the speech of the manifest is the tongue of the entity. Sorry, what? Yeah, I got sidetracked by the tongue of the entity. Right, of the possible thing, or rather it is the speech of the possible thing in the tongue of the manifest. In the same way, God gives news that he says with the tongue of his servant, quote, God hears him who praises him. End quote. All right. Well, now that we've all had a good tonguing, I mean, you know, like speaking, obviously, nothing weird. I hope that you enjoyed it. Under the banyan tree. It was better when he said it about the sycamore tree, wasn't it? That was from Twin Peaks. If you're gonna watch Twin Peaks, watch season 1, and then watch season 2, and then watch the movie Firewalk with Me, and then watch Twin Peaks: The Return, also known as season 3. So these 4 in this order: 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright. I guess that's it. This has been an episode, hasn't it? Alright. Next time it'll be me again, no doubt. Filling in for BT. Oh, that's a shame. He likes to do his tarot cards. Well, what can you do? We don't have our cards. We don't have our lawmen. But whoever's turn, whenever the bookshelf is up and we're completely moved, that next Carl Jung, if it's my turn or if it's Gwydion's turn, we'll give the turn to BT so we can have the experience of him putting cards up. Special thanks to the local yapping mutt for ruining the outro of this episode so gloriously. And special thanks to you, the chicken philosopher, looking into my eyes. Unless you're on the audio only Apple Podcasts, Broadcast, Podcast. Oh, hey. Broadcast, Podcast, iPod, Broadcast, Podcast. Oh, shit. Okay, until next time.